So, he could have infected our network, but thankfully my antivirus solution caught it, killed it, and then alerted me. But it was just ironic that it was somebody in the law enforcement industry that brought an infected USB device into our environment.
Welcome to Blue Team Diaries, the podcast that celebrates and honors the professionals who work tirelessly to defend their organizations and those who build tools to support defenders. In each episode, host Peter Manev invites his guests to share their stories and experiences in a fun and lighthearted conversation. Blue Team Diaries is sponsored by Stamus Networks, a global provider of network-based threat detection and response solutions. Learn more at stamus-networks.com.
Hey and welcome. Michael DiLalla is the Senior Network Technician for the Penfield Central School District. He has served in this role since 2009, where he is the primary network administrator tasked with all aspects of infrastructure configuration, maintenance, and cybersecurity. Mike has 25 years of IT experience in a career that has spanned educational, non-profit, and corporate organizations. Thank you very much for being with us here on the podcast. First question. Can you share a cool project you've been working on recently? Something that keeps you busy.
Absolutely. I got many of those, but thank you for inviting me to be on this podcast. I appreciate it. So one of the projects I think I've been working on recently actually goes around cybersecurity. So one of the issues that we were facing in our school as a district is that everyone's got a lot of tools. Right? We've got antivirus, we've got patches, we've got policies, got a lot of tech to kind of catch ransomware hackers, things like that. But one of the things that we were dealing with was, especially during the summer, is if a teacher calls us and says, "Hey, I forgot my password. Can you reset it for me?" How can we really verify that's the person we're really talking to? Because it could be anybody, right? It could be someone calling up and says, "I'm this person," and people naturally want to help other people. So it was kind of like there wasn't really a good technical solution to that specific problem, right? It's kind of like human interaction. So I got to thinking to myself, and I was like, well, I could probably write a PowerShell script to do something here. So what I'm doing was creating a PowerShell script that my staff can use. So what it does is that they launch the script. It asks for the users that's calling them their email address. They put it in. It then goes out and it goes to Azure and it grabs their two-factor phone number for their cell phone. It then creates a random number, 4-digit random PIN. It displays the PIN on my technician's work screen, and then it texts that PIN using an SMS gateway to that person's cell phone. So then they immediately, within a second or two, they get the 4-digit PIN. They read the PIN back to my staff member on the phone, and that verifies that they're actually talking to the person that claims to be that person. So that way, there's no way of anyone, saying, "Hey, I'm Jane Doe. I need you to reset my password." Because if they can't talk back to what the PIN is, they don't tell my tech what the PIN is, then they can't get their password reset.
Very nice, very nice. And I mean, is that project now complete, or you still want to add a few things or a few features to it or things like that, or?
It's complete now. I had to say a nice little, before I was using every cell phone provider has like an email address you could text your phone to email your phone. It comes with a text message. But we actually used a REST API to tie into an SMS gateway. So that way it goes through instantly. It's not filtered through any type of, Verizon cell phone spam filter or AT&T spam filter. It's going through a legitimate SMS gateway, so it always gets on the phone, on that person's phone.
Well, how did you come up with the idea? I mean, the idea I can understand, but how did you come up with actually doing it? I mean, I assume as a lot of people in cybersecurity, you're pretty busy. How did you come up with the time and the idea? Was it out of frustration? Was it just to make it easy for your colleagues? What drove you?
Well, I couldn't find a kind of a paid solution that would do all of what I was just saying right there, not without programming everyone's cell phone numbers into it. I wanted to grab onto a system that we already had data for. And since we require MFA, so we have everyone's cell phone numbers inside of Azure stored. So that was an easy place to grab that data from. But I wanted to do it because, I did this probably about a year or so ago, because it was kind of like a hole in our kind of cybersecurity plan, right? We don't want people resetting password unless you absolutely know that that's the person. So that was kind of it was something I always wanted to do, and I was like, well, maybe I can do this with PowerShell, and I was able to complete it completely, and now it's something that they use, probably a few times a week.
Oh, nice, excellent, cool. Um, well, having in mind that we're all with the background of this cyber industry where there is actually things happening all the time, and I understand if you cannot share details exactly, but the question begs my curiosity. Can you share with us like an oh crap moment or like a close call where you were like nearly breached or you managed to avoid disaster? If you can share any such a case or details, and like what was the experience out of it?
Sure, yeah. A couple years ago, I would have to say that it was interesting. So I was at home. It was probably 8:30 at night, and I got a email from my antivirus solution that I run. And the way I have it built out is it the ransomware is in a certain family, and so I have my antivirus system logged to a syslog server, and they say if you see a message that contains this word in it, email it to me. So I set it up like a few years ago, and nothing ever, mainly for ransomware, and nothing ever came through. Then one night at 8:30, it came into my email and said, "Hey, you got something here." It's like, what? 8:30 at night? School closes at like 5. So I look at it, and then I VPN in, and I remote into that machine, and it's a PowerPoint presentation that I see, and it's all about like cybersecurity. It's all about protecting, your data. And I'm watching the slides go through, and at the end it has Sergeant like some name from a local law enforcement agency, and I'm like, well, that's what are they doing in a classroom at 8:30 at night? Come to find out, he was doing a presentation to like parents about securing their data. And so what happened was he worked for like the cybersecurity for some law enforcement, and one of his jobs was to research like ransomware. When something comes in through a local like private company, he'll get the ransomware, submit it, then his team will like look at it. Well, somehow got onto the USB that stored his PowerPoint presentation. So he could have infected our network, but thankfully my antivirus solution caught it, killed it, and then alerted me. But it was just ironic that it was somebody in the law enforcement industry that brought an infected USB device into our environment. My security system detected it, deleted it, and notified me as such. But it was very odd, and I guess it was probably one of the closer times I've seen where actually a ransomware actual variant was into our network. But thankfully it was caught by our antivirus.
That's an interesting case, by the way. Kind of, I'm sure it generated interesting conversations with the corresponding side, of course.
It did. I let my manager know, and he let them know, and then they didn't realize that that he used it in their test environment. And their test environment happened to get that infected from the USB drive.
I think it can happen just like even without actually being actively targeted. Things like can happen just because of you miss something or you assume something and things like that, and get it from like a sandbox and test environment. That is very, very scary actually, because I was with your background especially, and I admire what you're doing because you're actually protecting a school system, right? So you're actively doing that as opposed to commercial folks or similar things or other organizations. But it's kind of a noble cause because you're actually defending kids from malicious actors. My question is, can that be really tough sometimes, having in mind you're actually protecting the kids, right? So I'm assuming it could be difficult sometimes knowing that somebody's actually or something is actually actively trying to do harm to actually kids, in high school, things like that. And I'm sure you've seen things. Does this make your job more difficult?
Yeah, if you look at the news, ransomware K-12 is one of the top attack verticals for ransomware attacks. Mainly because we don't have the huge budgets or the huge security teams that a lot of big companies do. So we do get attacks. I see, phishing tends to be a big thing. We did get one phishing, which was interesting. Most of the phishing that we get are like general, like they throw out 100,000 emails. They expect to get certain people to respond to that. One phishing attack came in, which was designed just for us in mind. It had our logo, it had our color scheme. It was hosted on, yeah, it was really because it had like a bird, which is kind of our sports team logo on it, and it went to a local U.S. based, like I think it was like Wix, where they give you like free 10 megabyte space or something like that, and is where it was hosted. So it was definitely a legitimate attack, and it went out to a lot of our staff. And this was before the days of MFA, so I think they got a few people on that one. But like most agencies now, we know obviously we use MFA now to help protect against those phishing attacks.
So that was actually a specifically targeted thing besides everything else. That was specifically crafted for you guys. Okay.
Yeah. Most of the ones have like the generic Microsoft logo on it, but this one said the Penfield IT department. Our color scheme, the red background was our color scheme. The logos from our website were embedded in it. So it was someone worked a little bit to try to get to us.
That is interesting. I mean, I'm sure things like that happen as you're just sharing that, and thank you very much for sharing that info. I'm sure things like that happen, but like, wow, sometimes when I step aside, when I look at it from a different perspective, is like, what would you get out of a school? You know what I mean? You're gonna run somewhere. Why would you do that? This is just like, it's a totally different type of organization, right? I mean, as I said, as a kid's learning organization, it has nothing to do, like, as you mentioned, the big organizations or big things where the ransomware's payout would be huge. It's just like, sometimes I think about it and I'm like, and I admire what you, like, once again, I admire what you're doing, because it's like, why would you target specifically that high school or a high school? It doesn't matter. Just goes to show, I think, that malware actors don't really have any scrutiny there, to be honest, and I'm sure you see a lot of that as well.
Yeah, I think the targeting could be because it's we're a government institution, so they could say, well, they have the money, they have a government is willing to pay out ransom. They could think of that type of situation where maybe they think the money's guaranteed, that we're definitely going to pay out 100% of the time. So I think it's because they know we don't have 50 people working in cybersecurity, right? I mean we aren't an IBM, we're not a Lenovo, we're not a big company, so maybe it makes in their mind maybe it's an easier attack.
You're actually a school, you're a learning institution, you're a school institution, you're not a cyber vendor, Sure.
Yeah.
There's a great difference. And so you were mentioning, like, one of the major constraints, of course, is like you have something very precious that you're defending, young kids, maybe next generation cybersecurity experts too. And naturally, you're under budget. You don't have all the personnel that you would want to have. Nobody does anyway in the high school system, I suspect. What is your go-to tool that you use every day and could live without, let's say, in that type of work?
Well, let's see. I think logs are very important to me in my kind of work. Everything from Active Directory audit logs to Azure audit logs to antivirus logs. Logs, even for troubleshooting, are big in my environment. I spend a lot of time reviewing logs, seeing if there's any threat actors. Maybe even as much as hardware that might be starting to fail will show up in some of my logging. So I have to say that my logging tools are pretty important. And then PowerShell. I do a lot of automation with PowerShell. I think I do a lot of work with that scripting language. So that is something that has been very, I would say, helped my position out a lot.
So do you think actually let's say PowerShell. Do you think actually the tool is as important as the person using it? Curveball question there.
In PowerShell, I was never a scripting guy, so I've always been, the GUI guy. I got into the mid '90s into IT, and then over time, I realized, the benefits of learning a scripting language, and so it's, you can do a lot with it, but it takes a big learning curve to get to learn it, as I think a developer would know who does programming all the time. But yeah, I think it's the more you can learn any type of, I think, additional language these days, the better you are with your career, and the more you can do with it. So
in other words, this is actually something that gives you flexibility, empowers you to do what you really want to do. But have you ever thought, like, if you had a chance to use another tool for the same job, would you do it? Is there another tool actually to replace that? No, I don't think so. Or?
No, PowerShell is really like a Windows, to do anything you want with it. PowerShell is nothing. It's not like it's a developing language like a Python or Ruby. It's nothing like that. It's strictly scripting, and so as a network administrator, scripting is really all I need to do to get to accomplish all of my tasks.
Sure. And especially when you were mentioning that you didn't have, all the tools and software that you need, you have to actually have to resort to doing your own thing and do your own scripting, just as you were mentioning with the password reset and the authentication early on, and all that. So you have to enable you. Well, question: if you if somebody's thinking about becoming a cyber defender, right? Our line of job, your line of job, let's say. If you have one piece of advice, what would it be?
Well, let's see. I think some advice. I think you want to start in the network administration field, right? You don't want to jump right into cybersecurity if they have a fundamental idea of how a network runs, right? You got to learn what your VLANs are, access control is, firewall rule is, everything from your antivirus, how to configure that correctly for the environment. In my opinion, I don't think you could just go straight from maybe a classroom setting to cybersecurity. I think you should have some type of network administration background. So you have a fundamental idea of what's going on in a network, learn your Wireshark, learn how to use these various technologies before you can go straight down like a cybersecurity path. That's, I think, having the underlying basic understanding of how a network works day to day, and even outside cybersecurity, is fundamentally important to understand the network and how it works as a whole.
Right. Well, on that note, actually, what made you choose cybersecurity? I mean, did you wake up one day and say, "This is what I'm going to do," or how did it happen?
Well, let's see. So I was, obviously, as a network administrator, you're jack of all trades, master of none, I think it is. So, I started, as I got later in my career, had the option of I can start focusing on niche things. Before it was like, because right now I do Cisco, I do VMware, I do ASA firewalls, I do, all the antivirus, cybersecurity. But cybersecurity is kind of been a focal point of mine because of everything you see in the news, right? People getting ransomware, phishing campaigns, hacks against websites. SolarWinds, I think, had that big hack. So, I've been kind of focusing more on those type of solutions because I find, I guess you would say it's interesting because it's constantly evolving. It's one of the things we had to solve was people were plugging in their laptops to our network, personal laptops, right? Go to a jack, plug in. Well, we deployed a NAC solution, so now when they plug in, it won't go anywhere, right? They don't have access to our network. So, they were doing that. So, I like when I can, see those problems, identify them, and then build solutions to solve those problems, to make us just that little bit more safer.
Right. So, what motivates you to still stay in the field and not go do something else? I'm assuming after some time, right? People are saying, "I've done this for a few years now. I'm fed up with it. I want to change." Do you have that?
Well, the great thing about my position is I get my hands in everything, right? Because we're not like a big company where all I do is cybersecurity, right? So I handle all the, all the VMware, all the Cisco stuff, all the
Right.
firewall stuff, antivirus stuff, group policy, Active Directory. So I've got my hands in a lot of different things, but because I have my access to all those various areas, I can fine tune them to kind of work together, right? So, like the Cisco, I have a VLAN, right? So I break out my VLAN so one VLAN can't necessarily talk to the other VLAN, right? So if something happened on one VLAN, it can't spread to the other. So, knowing that little bit of that knowledge kind of creates, an entirety of a solution where I'm not just focusing on securing Active Directory or securing my firewalls, securing my desktops. I can actually secure a little bit of everything so everything works together.
Right. Is there anything that you think could be stopping people from pursuing a career in cybersecurity? Is there anything that you thought is scarier than it actually is?
I don't think so. I think cybersecurity is a growing area. Obviously, as it keeps making the news. I think that and I think cloud is probably the next big thing where if you start getting into cloud solutions, that's going to be like the next area. I think they're going to focus on the hackers are going to focus on those cloud solutions because a lot of us are getting away from the on-prem world, where everything was hosted locally. Over time, everything's becoming cloud-based. So I think the focal of attack for people that work in cybersecurity now is going to be different a decade from now, when I think most of our data is going to be hosted in the cloud, and that's going to be where people are going to focus, their attacks.
Okay, that may sound a bit scary even for me now. That you mentioned it, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot there.
Sure. Final question. If there's somebody, would you like to give a shout out of any mentors that help you? Somebody, your teacher, your person that got you into cybersecurity?
That's so. Probably the person that got me in my career. So I've always been computers even as a kid, but in high school, I was doing a lot of. You remember war dialing? If you've been around, where you had the modem, it would dial. So in high school, you would set up the thing to dial, come home, and be all these modem carriers on the printer, right?
When you hear like, okay, that squeaky sound like.
Yeah, that's sound, right? And so then you would go in and you would say, okay, what are these? You dial them, and then some of them would be like, no security at all, right? It'd be some private company, because back then nothing was interconnected. So I started doing that stuff, and then I got into high school, and they had like a Novell network there. And I became friends with a teacher who was like, hey, we're having some problems with some of these computers in this lab that are networked. Can you see if you can fix them? So I started learning how to fix computers in the lab. And so I was like, wow, that's pretty cool stuff. I can use what I know to kind of like help people rather than war dialing all day. So I got the Novell manual, learned Novell NetWare, and I was able to troubleshoot the 50 computer lab. And I got paid for it while I was in high school to troubleshoot that stuff, fix cloud print queues, set up accounts, reset passwords. And that little bit of knowledge from high school propelled me into a job for right out of high school as a junior level network technician for a healthcare company. So I would shout out to Mr. Ramsey and was his name, and he really kind of would say, hey, you can actually make a living doing this stuff. And so that kind of started that, and it's been 26 years now in IT. So it's been quite the ride.
Amazing. Well, I would actually like to thank Mr. Ramsey too, because Mike, I'd like to thank you for being the professional that you are, for being a truly blue teamer defense. I admire what you're doing, truly, like doing a cyber defense in a school system, basically protecting kids. Only admirable stuff in there. Thank you very much for what you're doing. I want to also express gratitude for being on the podcast and recording. True pleasure. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure to be talking with you.
Likewise. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Take care.
Thank you for celebrating and honoring the defenders with Blue Team Diaries. You can find this and all our previous episodes on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. If you're interested in learning more about our sponsor, Stamus Networks, please visit stamus-networks.com.